Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sarah Furley, Director of Partnerships, and I'd like to welcome you to August's Connecting Knots. I hope you're all well, whether you're watching this live or whether you're listening to it in the future. So today's agenda, we're going to follow the normal Connecting Knots format. So we'll start off with an update from John Brewin. Paul Devlin, our chair, is actually on holiday at the moment, so that's why John's starting. And then we're going to go on to 5 presentations. And those presentations sort of cover 3 areas, really. They cover the how we deliver services, what services do we deliver, and who delivers those services, so about our staff. So we've got 3 items about how we deliver services. Matthew's going to talk about safer staffing. Sarah is going to talk about reducing long-term segregation, and Kaye is going to talk about the support that you can get for organisational development. Then we'll move on to what. So Craig is going to talk about developing our new trust strategy. So that will be about how we set out our vision and ambitions for the next 5 years. And then we're going to talk about our good news story about Dwayne and the amazing things that Dwayne has done. So I'll wait to get onto that. So that's the agenda. I hope you enjoy it. And as always, please put your comments and any questions in the chat and we'll coordinate that at the end. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to John and allow him to give the update.
Thanks, Sarah. Afternoon, everybody. John Brewin, Chief Executive. You're very welcome to this month's Connecting Knots. As Sarah said, I'm being the chair and the chief executive today, but I'll roll it all into one seamless overview of all the good things that's going on that I'd like to tell you about. The first thing to say, as ever, because it's the most important, is a massive thank you to everybody right across the organisation for what everybody's doing. We recognise and appreciate that times are tough currently. You know, whether you're working on wards, whether you're in crisis teams, in clinics, doing day services, visiting patients at home, and whether you're in our support corporate services, sorting out the payroll, the HR, the cleaning services, right across the organisation, sorting out the IT, etc., etc. It's full on. It's a national challenge, and you'll see it in the media, I'm sure, that the demand across primary care, organisations like ourselves, social care, into emergency departments, ambulance services, is unprecedented. And some records are being broken almost on a daily basis in terms of numbers of people being seen, operations being done, ambulances being called, and it's very, very difficult. It would be nice to say if we just did this, it would all be fine, but we are still in fairly unprecedented times, really. Some of it is pandemic related, so I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, in as much that we still have some staff that are off, whether because they're shielding, whether they're unwell, and whether they're isolating. But that's not the whole story. We're also in the middle of the summer holiday season, and it's really important, isn't it, that we're encouraging people to take their annual leave. It's so important to get breaks and to look after ourselves. We know people are exhausted. We know that some services are really struggling on a daily basis to cover their rotas, that we're having to use more agency and bank to support this. But it is a priority that we try to make sure that we maintain our service and provide the best service that we can. So that's huge thank you to everybody that's involved in that. It's a team effort, and despite everything, I think that the trust is in a relatively good position. Next, a bit of an update on all things COVID and pandemic. We see the figures, don't we, on the TV and in the news on a daily basis. The overall case numbers seem to have plateaued at the high 20, low 30,000 new cases a day, despite the continued easing of lockdown measures. But significant numbers nationally, about 6,000 plus are requiring hospitalisation. But the good news continues to pertain that those numbers are significantly reduced compared with the pre-vaccination era in terms of number of people needing to go to hospital, and those that are in intensive care and those that are sadly dying. But it's still it's probably around about 100 a day currently, isn't it? Which is individually is a tragedy for many families. How this current wave is going to pan out is very difficult to predict. There's lots of opinion and data out there to inform our thinking, but I think the one known is that as we move into autumn and winter, it's going to be a very testing time. I'd like to be able to say differently, but I think we're all aware that there are still tough months ahead. What can we do? Continue to support our staff, make sure that everybody's aware that we've got a brilliant staff health and wellbeing service, and we've showcased it in this space previously, and details of how to get in touch are on Connect and easily available, and make sure that you and your colleagues are aware of the range of things that we can offer to help support. Taking leave is important, supporting each other, looking at our values in terms of being kind and compassionate, and on the watch that, for your colleagues, that we've all got, haven't we, the out of work challenges to manage in it with our families about getting through these tough weeks. Another thank you in terms of all those people that have taken up the offer of the vaccine, and the number of that have had both doses is very high in this organisation. A big thank you to everybody that continues to do the lateral flow testing twice a week and report their scores. It's really important that we, as an organisation, are aware of where potential hotspots may be, and we're required to do this. So thank you to everybody that's, which is the vast majority of people that are doing this. To note, there's obviously a lot of debate, isn't there, nationally about vaccination hesitancy and lack of uptake in certain areas. Some of you will have seen that nationally, for people that will be working into care homes from November, requiring a double jab vaccine will be required. Sorry, that's not good English. And that's mandated. So from the middle of September, those staff will need to have had their first dose to enable them to continue in that role. Why is that important? I think that is because this may well not be the first and only mandation of the, if that's the word as well, of the vaccine, and we may see it mandated in other clinical areas to manage this risk of transmission and illness, and I think those sorts of decisions will be taken over the coming weeks and months again at a national level, and it won't be for local trusts like ours or systems to make that decision. So that's a watch this space. So from one extreme of the very here and now, the day-to-day challenges, just to reflect on some work that links in with some of the things I'm sure Craig will be discussing in the strategy piece, and again for us to think about. We hear a lot, don't we, of the new favourites, three-letter acronym, the ICSs. So the integrated care systems. I've talked a little bit about this here. So this is the change to how the NHS is going to be organised at a regional and local level, and we'll see the end of the CCGs, clinical commissioning groups, and the creation of formal ICSs. Simply stated, an integrated care system is an amalgamation of all the health and local authority health focused organisations within a county, so within Nottinghamshire. So our trust, the acute trust, the CCG, local authorities will become described within an ICS. Why is that important? It's important for many reasons. From our trust perspective, it's important because there's a real emphasis on making sure that we can describe patient pathways that flow much more easily from primary care general practice into organisations and back out without cumbersome commissioning mechanisms and organisational boundary walls. And if it works, will enable clinicians to work much more easily together and collaborate across these pathways to improve the quality and experience for patients, service users, and improve outcomes and improve efficiencies. Easy to say, difficult to do. Why is it important for Knott's Healthcare? We're already working collaboratively within the Nottingham ICS. We've led on aspects of the vaccination programme. We're about to describe what's called a provider collaborative, so big providers working together collectively for the same purpose, so linking up with Sherwood Forest hospitals and Nottingham University hospitals to create a collaboration where we enable an environment to develop that clinicians can transform pathways to do, as I was saying a minute ago, make access easier, access to treatments, interventions, and improve outcomes. So this is a really exciting time. There will be significant changes. I always sort of finish on this piece by saying that whilst change can be anxiety provoking, there will always be demand for the core services that we provide, whether that's across mental health, learning disability and autism services, whether it's in the secure forensic services, which we're a national provider of, whether it's in community health services, where we've got a whole range of community home visiting, day, embedded services for physical health care. The way that it's all organised might look a bit different, but the clinical expertise, the skill sets, the knowledge we have will always be required to help us deliver that across the county. So I think with the right inputs, we can make a real success of that. So just wanted to mention that because you might hear and come across ICS, ICP, all sorts of things beginning with I. Just give you a bit of context, but there'll be things that you can get involved in across the coming months in terms of engagement programs to contribute to what that may look like. And then to sum up from me, Sarah and everybody, just to go back to what you were saying about the content of the agenda. Really looking forward to today's presentations. Referenced already the strategy conversation. There's a brilliant positive star story, and the work that colleagues have done on long-term segregation is truly fantastic. To finish though, I just wanted to give people a heads up on the National Staff Survey. This is hot off the press. You'll remember we've mentioned that this year they're trialling something called a pulse survey. So an annual National Staff Survey is spends a lot of its time being a bit out of date. So there are going to be quarterly pulse surveys. We've got hot off the press some headlines from our own staff that was completed last month. And whilst I'm not going to read it all out in detail, apologies for referring to the piece of paper in front of me. So we had 1,159 people completed the pulse survey. So thank you to everybody that took the time to fill it in. Just to remind people that in terms of our priorities, this was what we agreed through an engagement piece that these would be. So improving the experience at work for our BME colleagues, reducing discrimination and bullying, improving staff health and wellbeing, raising awareness of specific issues faced by disabled colleagues, and reducing violence experienced by colleagues. So just a couple of headline numbers, and there'll be more of this, so don't worry if you miss it. Within this pulse survey, of those that responded, 64% advised you'd recommend the place as a trust to work, and that's slightly down on the 68% from the National Staff Survey back last October. Those priority areas that I mentioned above remain an issue. So just over a quarter of respondents advising that they've been bullied or abused at work in the last 3 months. 9% experience physical violence, and again there's a higher rate in BME respondents. So totally unacceptable. I know we've started to do some really good work in this space around the culture and values and behaviours, and we know that there's still lots more to do. So just wanted to give you a bit of a flavour of that. There's a lot more analysis to do, and we've also for the first time included some specific questions of people that work on the bank. So thank you for those people that contributed to that as well. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that gives you a bit of a flavour of some of the things that is hot topics at the moment. Hope you enjoy the presentations and the commentary this afternoon. Get involved, ask some questions, put your hand up. Enjoy the next hour and a bit. I'm now, I think, seamlessly, Alex, going to go into a video around safe staffing from Matt Hammond. Thanks very much.
Hi everybody, I'm Matthew Hammond. I'm the Trustwide Matron for Safer Staffing, and just very briefly, I'm here to talk to you guys today about safer staffing and to update you on some of the things that we've been doing in the Trust around safe staffing. So, really very briefly, what is safe staffing? Well, in essence, safe staffing is about us having the right staff with the right skills being deployed at the right place and the right time. This is a really kind of brief overview, but it's a really good kind of definition around what safe staffing is and what it should look like. There's quite a lot to it, but ultimately it falls under Regulation 18 from the CQC, which is part of the Health and Social Care Act, which essentially says that we should have enough suitably qualified staff, competent and experienced, to be able to meet all the other regulatory requirements under the Health and Social Care Act. So it's a bit of a catch-all, but essentially it embodies that we need to have the right staff with the right skills, the right place and time. But what does that actually look like? Because that's all well and good. It's very much a definition and a theoretical. But what does it actually look like in practice? Well, it depends really, and it kind of depends where you sit. And I don't mean that as in a chair like in the picture, but whereabouts you sit on within the trust, because what the safe staffing looks like for the nurse in charge of a ward somewhere can be very different to what safe staffing looks like for the director of nursing, for example. But ultimately, it has the same kind of core principles, which is around the delivery of safe, effective, caring and well-led services on a sustainable basis. That's kind of the core elements to what safe staffing really is. What does it look like locally then? So locally, and when I say locally, I mean probably at a ward level, what safe staffing looks like is that you've got an establishment set which is safe and effective. You're able to care for your patients and you're able to meet all your kind of patients' needs. That the system around you and your ward and your patient needs has some flexibility, and that the system is able to respond to kind of changes in workload, whether that be in increased patient acuity, unexpected demands on the service, such as needing to take a patient to hospital, whatever, that the system has some flexibility to be able to respond to that. That there's effective escalation processes there in place which work, which is where if you feel that the staffing's not right and it's unsafe, that there's somewhere to go, there's an escalation process which listens to you and is able to take some action to be able to mitigate the risk or solve some of the staffing dilemmas which you might be facing. And finally, that locally, that there's an ongoing kind of monitoring and improving around staffing and how we're able to care for our patients. Organisationally then, how does it look? And I use this picture of a table and chairs, and I'll probably get told off for this, but this is always what I imagine whenever anybody says the board or the board of directors. I imagine this table and chair. So this is the picture that I like to use. Essentially, organisationally, we need to make sure that there's really effective governance structures in place to be able to have a real good understanding about staffing deployment, patient safety, quality of care, for us to be able to take action and be able to just be assured that things are okay or not okay, and if they're not okay, so we can take some action to try and solve some of those issues. Organisationally, we are required to make sure that every area has an establishment review. Historically, this always used to be inpatient services. More recently, there's a bit more of a push around community services as well. But we need to make sure that establishment reviews are occurring at least every 6 months to make sure that planned staffing that we're putting in is safe, effective, sustainable, all those kind of core principles that I mentioned before. That we're using evidence-based staffing. For inpatient services, this involves the use of evidence-based staffing tools, such as the mental health optimal staffing tool or the safer nursing care tool. They give us kind of that objective evidence base around staffing. That there's very similarly to the locally, that there's effective escalation processes which work, and again that goes back to the really good governance structures. And finally, exactly the same as locally, that we're continuing as an organisation to monitor and improve kind of our staffing across. So that's a real kind of brief overview around what safe staffing looks like. What I'll move on to then is what's new. Because as a trust, we've done loads over the past 12 months around safe staffing and development of different things to try and support safe staffing. One of them has been the development of a trust-wide safer staffing group. This group meets monthly and reviews kind of staffing across the trust, identifying areas which are particularly busy, particularly stretched in terms of staffing, where staffing's not quite right or the staffing's been really above or below kind of what we'd expect it to be. And that all kind of gets pulled into a monthly safer staffing report which gets reviewed. We then look at things like the safe staffing dashboards, which have been developed to try and support that process, and that looks at the staffing, so how staffing been, compares the staffing to patient safety indicators, how safe services have been, how many serious incidents wards have had, what sort of incidents have had, what kind of themes and trends are developing, quality of care, care process stuff, so how well we've filled bank and agency shifts, these sorts of things, and then kind of workforce indicators, you know, sickness levels, bank and agency use, these sorts of things, vacancies, and it pulls them all together in one place to give us a really good kind of overview around what safe staffing is. One of the other things that we've done over the past 12 months is we've reviewed kind of the process around our establishment reviews for the inpatient services, in particularly for mental health, local mental health services and the forensic services. And as I mentioned earlier, we've started using these evidence-based staffing tools, and just about every area in the trust now has undergone a establishment review using these tools. And if they've not, they're due to undergo them in the next month. That the establishment reviews have moved away from being purely based on the nursing establishment, but to focus on the whole MDT, acknowledging that all members of the MDT have a role in keeping patients safe and the delivery of safe and effective care. And the format's very much been focused on this: right staff, right skills, right place and time. So we've got the right numbers of staff planned in, have those staff that we've got planned in got the right skills and experience to be able to meet the patient needs, and are we making the best use of that resource that we can? Are we deploying them at the right place and the right time? Then finally, triangulating all this information along with professional judgment to be able to say, yes, we've got safe staff in there. No, we need to do something about it, and here's the actions that we're going to take. Also, we've been piloting establishment reviews for community teams because they don't have kind of a national standard attached to them in terms of using evidence-based staffing tools. We've had to develop a bit of an internal process for how we're monitoring and reviewing the establishments. We've started piloting that in the local mental health teams in adult mental health, and the plan's going to be to roll that out further when we've got a bit more when we've been able to spend a bit more time getting that methodology right. One of the other things I really think has been really important is we've developed something called red flag staffing events. And these are essentially clearly defined events which, if they occur, that essentially patients potentially are going to be put at risk. So we've clearly defined these events, and these are things like preceptorship nurses working as lone qualified, for example, on a ward as the nurse in charge, clearly has an increased risk to the patient group. So we need to do something about it. So we've clearly defined these events, and we've come up with a really clear and robust escalation process, which should be able to resolve the events when they occur or have the potential for occurring. And finally, it's just going through the final stages of approval within the trust-wide approval group, but we've developed, this has been included in the trust-wide safer staffing policy. Safe Care. So for those of you who don't know Safe Care, this is a system which works alongside the e-roster system, and we're doing a big review project starting with IDD and CAM service to review the functionality of Safe Care. Why are we using it? What do we use it for? Embed kind of the current deployment methodology. So rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, we're going to use how staffing is already being deployed. In most areas, that tends to be observation driven, so enhanced observations, intermittent observations, these sorts of things. And then what we're looking at doing is embedding that process and system within the existing systems, things like the daily demand meetings. And then very finally, because I know I'm running very short on time, we've developed a Connect page, which has got all of these resources within them. So it's got all the reports that get produced around safe staffing, a copy of all the different dashboards for the services, the wards, everything's kind of within there. All the guidance around safe staffing, red flag staffing events, the evidence-based staffing tools are kind of all within this one place now. I've also started to develop some videos around safe staffing, what it looks like, how to use some of the tools, the sort of things that you can do to try and understand your safe staffing a bit better. And finally, it's being updated regularly. So I'm updating that with anything new that comes out. So it's kind of a one-stop page for all things safe staffing. And that's it from me. So thank you all very much for listening. It's been a pleasure.
And I'm saying this as a big advocate for public education.
I realise Matthew's not with us, but I would like to thank him for that, because that presentation was really clear and sets out the gains that have been made over the last few months, still recognising that there's more work to do. So I'd really encourage everybody to go and use that Connect page for the evidence and the available tools. I also would just like to apologise. We do realise that the sound wasn't great on that video. So those of you that have turned your volume up, you might want to turn it back down again, or we may deafen you as we go further with the next few presentations. So with that, I am going to hand over to Craig, who is going to talk about how we're going to develop our trust strategy through the rest of this calendar year. Craig, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Craig Sharples. I'm Head of Strategic Development and currently I'm leading the development of the trust strategy, as Sarah and John mentioned, supported by members of my team. I've got about 10 minutes today just to reflect on where we're at with our strategy, on the development of our strategy, what the next steps are, and more importantly, how staff and patients can get involved in the development of this. I've got about 10 or so slides I'm going to whip through, if that's all right, Rochelle. Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Right. Our current strategy is due for renewal. It's due to be renewed earlier this year, and we started quite a big piece of work mid-late last year to refresh and to start engaging with people to refresh our strategy. But the second wave of COVID hit around that time, so it was only right and proper that work was paused. We did do some engagement across the organisation with staff networks, but that wasn't extensive. It did give us some really good rich data there, some good rich feedback. The pause we've had since then, it's really enabled us to reflect on the last 18 months and what we've learned as an organisation from our response to the pandemic, and also, as John mentioned earlier, around ICSs, reflect on and think about the impact and learning we've got from regulatory changes around integrated care systems becoming formally established bodies, and the learning from our provider collaboratives and how we can take that forward into new care delivery models. Fundamentally, COVID and our response, it's fundamentally changed the way we work. The fact we're doing this right now is evidence of just how far we've come just with the technology, but also how this learning around how, by empowering our staff to make decisions with that agility, we can do things really quickly. So again, it's just more learning to take forward into our new strategy. Next slide, please. Our strategy will determine our direction of travel over the next 5 years. I think, as John and Sarah have said, it's about who we are, what our priorities are going to be, and what difference that's going to make. Fundamentally, so what? Our strategy could be a beautiful document sat on a shelf, but we want it to be a meaningful representation of our organisation. We want the strategy to ooze not self-care and be recognisable to our staff and our patients. And because of that, it's going to inform the decisions and our strategic decisions, our service level decisions, and our individual objectives. So getting the engagement in this at the early stages and throughout is really important to me as the lead for this, but equally to the executive team and our board. What we have learned and what we've listened to over the last 18-24 months, particularly coming through the engagement work around our values and behaviours, is the staff say they come to work to make a difference. So we want this strategy to be how are we going to make that difference. It's not about delivery of day-to-day business as usual activities that any good NHS organisation will do, but it's around using the benefit and experience of our staff, and also the insight around population health and what our staff and patients are telling us to think. So what's going to be different? What are we going to do differently? Next slide, please. As I said, we're in between. Technically, we're in between strategies at the moment. So to this end, the board this month agreed these key priorities for this year. Again, and there's 4 key strategic themes which hopefully you'll recognise or come to recognise shortly around quality, our people, our performance, and well led, doing the right thing. I won't go into the detail of this today, but I think it's just important that colleagues across the organisation are aware that whilst we don't have a formal strategy in date, we do have some key strategic priorities for the year. What I will also say is on Connect and within the chat, there is something called a 7-minute briefing on our annual plan, which talks about more detail in terms of the background and how we got to this and how we monitor this and how we use this going forward. Next slide, please, Shane. So I've talked a bit about where we are. Now it's the next steps. What are we going to do next? So I'm working with Ellie. Ellie Lewis and my team is doing an awful lot of work on this around developing our case for change, working with our senior leadership team to develop the evidence base for our new strategy. So it's looking at all the information available to us from feedback from staff, service users, and also the insight that's available to us from our stakeholders, from this joint strategic needs assessment around population health analysis, demand predictions, workforce assumptions, financial plans, and going back to the ICS and provider collaboratives. It's taking all of this and putting it in a big old sausage machine and turning it through to develop some real key insights around what are the drivers for change for the services we provide and the people who receive them. And that evidence base is then going to be presented to our board of directors to inform our direction and our intended outcomes. To support that, we have got, as I say, a big piece of work around the evidence base, but there's also some draft objectives which are built on what was engaged on last year, but to provide a bit of a framework for us to start engaging with people around thoughts and vision around what does this mean for me, what does this mean for my team, what does it mean for my organisation and the patients. So I'm going to do a really quick whistle-stop tour through what these 4 objectives look like, partly because of time, but partly because I don't want to steal the thunder of the engagement exercise we're about to embark on. So if we just move on to the next slide, please, Shane. So the first draft objectives around quality, and it's there to provide the best care and support we can. And then there's some core principles, core deliverables underneath that broad heading, which is what we're going to engage on. I'm going to look at each of those and think about what does competent, or what does it look like today? What does it look like good? What does best look like? And start to develop a good outcome framework around these, driven by the evidence and the intelligence available to us. So we can measure that impact. We can measure that so what. So as I say, we've got one around quality and providing the best care and support. We can move on to the next slide, please. Hopefully you'll recognise some of these themes. Our people, making our trust a diverse, inclusive and great place to work. Thinking about culture, values, retaining high quality, high calibre staff, looking after our people. Again, I don't think there's anything more to add there because we'll be doing quite a lot of work on this going forward. Next slide, please. Our performance, maximising our potential and delivering best value. Thinking about sustainability, thinking about environmental impact, thinking about our role, using digital within the organisation and broader. And then the final objective, the next slide, please, is around well led. And that's fundamentally simply doing the right thing every day. And that's partly the organisation putting the structure and framework and the architecture in place to support and enable that. But then also how we work broader across system and region and nationally with some of our services. Like I say, we're doing loads more engagement on this. If I move on to the next slide, I can about how you can get involved in this. So today is effectively the launch of this engagement. I'll talk about there's a 7-minute briefing around our strategy development as well, which will be shared in the Q&A. But there will be lots of engagement opportunities coming up over the next couple of months, today being the start, but also we'll be doing workshops around each of our objectives. We'll be meeting with staff networks across the trust. We'll be looking to hold focus groups with patients and service users. We're going to try and wheel me out and Sarah and Ellie as far and wide as we can to attend team meetings and see as many people as we can to get views. And where we can't, we're going to there'll be some documentation, some workbooks which we can cascade locally for teams to use in the same way we did vision and values. So in summary, the next slide, please. What are the take-home messages from this launch, based from this introduction? We've got a strategy that's under development at the moment. We've got some key priorities for this year agreed. We've got 4 key draft objectives that we've developed, and we're about to launch a big engagement exercise on those draft objectives, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for all staff to get involved. So that's me and strategy for now. I'm sure you'll be hearing and seeing more of me over the forthcoming months. If you've got any questions, comments, please use the Q&A, and we'll put them up at the end of the session. But what I will do now is I'll hand over to Sarah Foster, who's going to talk about a fresh team approach to reducing long-term segregation. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for that, Craig. So as he stated, my project is called A Fresh Team Approach to Reducing the Long-Term Segregation. So my name is Sarah Foster, and I am the lead nurse for the Aintree Autism Ward. And I'll give you a bit of history on this project. So the introduction of the Autism Ward within the National High Secure Learning Disability Service allowed us opportunity to reevaluate some of the progress we wanted to make, some of the goals that we'd already achieved, and where we wanted to take this service as a whole. And one area of concern was the amount of time a particular patient had spent in long-term segregation, which had obviously caused a great deal of scrutiny, both internally and externally. It wasn't a very simple, straightforward story. This particular individual had a lot of barriers preventing him from moving on. One being his own personal choice to self-isolate. Now, this was not only a case of within the hospital, where he had been the longest serving long-term segregation patient that we had for nearly 10 years, but also prior to his admissions here, he'd used seclusion in previous hospitals as a way of segregating himself. He'd used time in when he lived in his own flat. He'd actually used that opportunity to segregate himself from the world. He wouldn't let people in, he wouldn't let carers, etc., which unfortunately had led to his need to be admitted to secure services. He also had difficulty in building trusting relationships with people due to past traumas, his learning disability, his paranoia, his autism. There was a lot of challenges around his communication. He not only spoke in a very sporadic way, he used other words to describe things. He had different names. So it was very much a language that you had to understand yourself. So, for example, all the nursing staff, he had his own name for the nursing staff. So to a stranger coming onto the ward, it could be quite disorientated to what he was referring or who he was speaking about. So there needed to be a great deal of relationship building with this gentleman. There was also, as I can show you all imagine, there was a long history of violence with this individual, and he had caused, unfortunately, life-changing injuries to staff in the past. He'd ended staff's careers. So there was a fear amongst staff, as well as a lot of issues with this individual patient. However, I always like to look on the positive of life. There were opportunities to progress positively. One being, this was a brand new team, a brand new service, and we had brand new ideas. So the autism service was established at the start of the first lockdown as the pandemic began. That is when we came into place. We had a new setup as far as the ward went. So my role, for example, as the lead nurse for the autism service was a brand new role that was put in place specifically for this. So it was a band 6 post, and then there was 2 further band 4 staff that were communication support workers. Next slide, please. We did find that this is an extra slide that's been thrown in. I'm sorry, I just want to explain this one. There is a podcast that I did do about this project. So if I do not get all your questions answered during this presentation or in the backup chat afterwards, there is a podcast that you can watch where I do explain some more of the work. I'd forgotten about that slide, apologies. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there was a great movement with our service being new and enthusiasm, and these brand new roles that were supernumerary that were allowing us to put the time and pressure into making changes, making the positive changes that we wanted to establish within this service. So we decided that the first priority would be to reduce this segregation, because we were given some optimism around this patient being able to move down the secure services. So next slide, please. So the aim was to encourage small, short-term, achievable goals that could become embedded into regular practice. So the idea was to simply unlock this individual's door. Initially, I was only looking at sort of 20 minutes a day where this door was unlocked. Staff would be available for him should he wish to come out of his room. But we had to remove his association with the lock being the security for himself and replace it with that feeling of safety in his own safe space, just being his room. And that's what I wanted. That was my priority, was for him to feel that he had the choice. He had the choice to remain in his room where he felt safe, but he had the choice to come and engage with others and experience life on the ward and try out new things. Whereas he purely felt that his only safe place was if we had put that lock on that door. So we made attempts to discuss this plan with the patient to obtain a collaborative involvement. However, his level of understanding was very limited, and unfortunately he's unaware that he's actually in a hospital. He believes that he lives in a flat and that we are actually his friends rather than nursing staff. So there was a communication issue there that we needed to work very carefully with. But what I did need, and I think this is the real key point of this project, was we needed all staff to feel involved and to feel that this could be something that they could take ownership of, that they could feel a sense of achievement were it to pay off. So I engaged the staff at every stage, listened to a lot of their concerns. It wasn't just the nursing staff, this was the wider MDT. So this was your occupational therapists, your speech therapists, your nurse practitioners, your matrons, your medics. Everybody who was involved in this particular patient's care was involved in these conversations, because we needed that. We needed people to feel that they were invested in something that was going to be beneficial and positive. So we did a big history check, looked at a lot of the risk histories that had upset people, that had caused concern, and we managed to change the conversation from purely being about risk and started to look at it more as a needs-led. This is what this patient needs. He needs us to look at his care in a whole new way, a fresh approach, something that gives him the opportunity to have the life that he deserves. So that was how we managed to change the culture, change the conversation. It was slow, it was steady, but it was consistent. The big breakthrough for myself came when I became lucky enough to join the Florence Nightingale Leadership Programme, and one of the projects that was set for us to do was a QI project, which is what, if you go onto the podcast, you'll see a great deal of work around that. But the QI process was a fabulous opportunity to actually have a guideline, a set of framework to work within that would allow us to see the progress, see what we were achieving. I've got a very good copy of the project on a page further into this presentation, which you won't be able to see on the screens, I appreciate, but should anybody want a copy of it, please let us know. But this was a really good idea because all the staff could get involved in creating the driver diagram to establish what were the priorities, what were the needs, how could we achieve these, break them down into little steps. I think the important thing to stress to everybody is the need for small, achievable steps. Setting yourself too great a goal is just going to lead to failure. So by having just this 20-minute exposure with the door open, it gave staff a belief that it was reasonable, it was achievable. I also felt that by doing this and putting as much work into it as possible, it would be a framework that could be replicated for others. So next slide, please. I've just skipped a slide. So as you say, the quality improvement project gave us that opportunity to base it into very simple, achievable steps. But the best part about the QI project is the plan, do, study, act cycles, which next slide, please. So these were where you could actually look at what you were doing at the time, evaluate how it was working, and then look at making changes without seeing yourself as necessarily failing at something, because you could still see the progress. So the first thing we discovered was the introduction of the spell training, which is by a 2-day autism training programme from the National Autistic Society for all the nursing staff and wider MDT, and also the introduction of the reflective practice sessions on a weekly basis for staff to air concerns, discuss their views, evaluate care, look at progressing care. And then the next cycle I looked at was that we weren't necessarily identifying staff on the rota as being responsible for that 20 minutes that we needed. So again, it was something we could highlight, we could evaluate, and then we could really get to the bottom of and make a change. So we introduced it as part of a regular commitment. It became a regular observation and responsibility. The next stage was, I'd say, the most important one, was increasing staff's confidence, increasing their abilities to communicate with the individual, but also increasing the patient's self-esteem. Because obviously after many years within a choice of having isolation and choosing to be in segregation, there was quite a bit of work we needed to do about his own level of confidence and dealing with people and experiencing new lives and new experiences. So I did lots of conversations with staff, spent a lot of time discussing the importance of what their concerns were and how I could address them, how we could work together to make these changes and to increase this 20 minutes, what we needed to increase this 20 minutes. My goal originally was just to increase his opportunity to have his door unlocked for up to 2 hours. It was a 6-month project, starting with 20 minutes, wanting to get up to 2 hours a day. Sounds a very small project, but for this guy, it would be life-changing. However, the success of the project and the involvement with the staff and their genuine buying into this, they felt that we could progress it faster and we could do more with the individual as confidence grew. So we introduced a new document called My Routine with the patient, and the mantra became, my door is now unlocked as standard and only locked when needed. So no longer we were looking at 20 minutes or even 2 hours, we were now looking at maybe the whole day. This patient could have his door unlocked because he began to understand the importance of just using his door and shutting it. That allowed this safe space. Next slide, please. As I said, very busy slide, and I apologise you won't be able to see a great deal on here, but this does tell a very good story of how we dealt with all the things that arose during this project, and all the situations that arose, how we dealt with them, how staff were involved and became very passionate about seeing this progress and actually getting this patient to a stage we never thought possible. And I'm really pleased to say, next slide please, segregation has now actually been discontinued completely since Monday the 14th of June. This is a massive piece of work, and the whole team, it could not have been achieved without the new focus of the ward, the importance of the supernumerary roles, and the fact that they were so motivated to see a difference for this individual. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please put them in the question box. And I'd now like to hand you over to Kaye Hunter. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm Kaye Hunter. I work within the Culture and Organisational Development team within Knott's Healthcare. And I want to talk to you today a little bit more about JRC, or Just and Restorative Culture in Knott's Healthcare, what it means, why it's important, what's happening at all levels, and how we all need to be involved, and how the OD team supports this activity. So, culture. What is culture then? Well, really simply put, it is just the way we do things around here. It's something that's felt through the interactions that we have with each other, through our behaviours, through our attitudes, and our values actually underpin our culture. Next slide, please. Thank you. So why does it matter? Well, in Knott's Healthcare, we're expected to deliver safe, effective, well-led care. And we know that some of our results need to improve at the moment, and that times are tough, as John said earlier. We currently have the perfect culture. Our culture is perfect to deliver the results we're getting. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we getting the results that we want? And if we want to change the results, then we need to change the culture. Now, our organisation is simply made up of people. Everybody's got a part to play in creating a culture that will deliver high quality care. Next slide, please. So what does it mean in Knott's Healthcare? Now, you've all probably seen this before, and I'm not going to go through this in any major detail, but our ambition for a culture that supports us all to deliver outstanding care is just and restorative culture. And you can see from the slide what that means. It's acting with compassion, treating people fairly and justly, embracing a learning culture. You know, if things go wrong, we seek first to understand, and it's an ethos by which we're all accountable for our actions. Next slide, please. But there's a requirement at all levels. As I say, our organisation is made up of people, quite simply. So there's a requirement at all levels to make things happen, to shape and improve the care that we give. You know, there is something about our individual skill, knowledge, expertise that's absolutely vital, obviously, but no one delivers care in isolation. What we all do, we do together in teams as part of a system of care, and our culture, how we do things, how we work together, how we behave, how we treat each other is just as important to our patient outcomes. So I think, as Sarah alluded to at the beginning, you know, there's something about the what, you know, from national drivers, targets, commissioning, regulatory requirements, as well as our own strategic and national objectives. We all understand what we need to achieve. A just and restorative culture is the ambition for how we actually achieve it. So it's about the care and the support that we should all experience and give to colleagues every day that enables us to do our jobs, whatever they are, to the best of our abilities every day. Now, we tend to talk about this, and you will have heard this before, in a trust team me way. Next slide, please. Quite simply, at a trust level, there are several different things that you will hear being, you know, there are lots of things that are happening that are intended to support our people and influence organisational culture. So you'll have heard about the just and restorative culture with its 5 key enablers, but we're also thinking about closed cultures. We're talking about our values, we're talking about learning and development at an organisational level, leadership and management development, freedom to speak up, and national staff survey. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through this in detail because I want to talk in more detail about how we all get involved and what we're doing. You will have heard, you know, about the just and restorative culture previously. We've talked about it lots of times, but it is about how we meet our aspiration to have a just and restorative culture. And in Knott's Healthcare, we've identified those 5 key areas or 5 key enablers to that. So the way we respond to errors, how we support that learning culture as an organisation, Staff support. So how do we support staff to stay healthy, but how do we also support staff, you know, in investigations, for example, you know, the distress that, you know, acknowledging the distress that that causes, and how do we support all people involved in those. The psychological safety, we talk about psychological safety, but in a workplace, this is the belief that the environment is safe for interpersonal risk taking, and that people feel safe to speak up and to give and receive feedback, really in pursuit of clinical excellency. Can't speak today, sorry. Civility and respect. So this follows the work from Dr. Chris Turner, you know, the idea that civility within teams creates that sense of safety. That's a key ingredient of safe teams and high quality care. And also we talk at trust level about equality, diversity and inclusion, and that's about us all valuing and embracing the difference and working to create a fairer and a more inclusive Knott's healthcare for patients and staff. Next slide, please. You will also have heard us talk about closed cultures. You know, it isn't new, but the CQC is starting to look out for warning signs as part of their routine inspections, and they will carry out unannounced inspections in areas where their intelligence suggests that there might be evidence of closed cultures or risks of those developing. And the CQC simply defines a closed culture as a poor culture in a health or care setting that increases the risk of harm, including human rights abuses. They'll look for things like poor experience of people receiving care, weak leadership management, poor skills and experience and training of staff providing care. So these are shaping our approach and really informing how we receive assurance as a trust. You will also heard, and I know that we've spoken about this today, about our organisational values, and again created in collaboration with staff. But these values reflect what we feel is important to our trust and really need to underpin how we work together and deliver care. We talk about leadership and leadership development and management development and our learning and development, but organisationally we continue to support the professional development of staff in ensuring that people have access to learning to ensure that they continue to gain the right knowledge and skill to be competent in roles. At an organisational level, we have a freedom to speak up guardian, and I know that Simbi's been here before to speak about her role. So we have a strategy, we have champions in place. And then we've also talked again today about our national staff survey and the pulse survey that John mentioned. But this is about, at an organisational level, making sure that we retain a focus on what staff are telling us through the staff survey. So all of this is important, but if I have the next slide, please. That sets out our ambition as an organisation, but for this to be a reality, you know, the role that managers, teams and individuals play in all of this is absolutely vital. We've said, you know, organisations are made up of people, and it's people that change the culture. So it's important that all of us, managers, teams, consider how they work together and the future results they want to achieve. Some of the ways we do this as a team is having that conversation about your behaviours in practice. So developing your team BIPs, but also taking time out to reflect when you think about the what you do and the actions and all of the roles that you have to do and meeting the needs of patients, also taking time out to reflect how you do that. You know, thinking about what does it feel like to work in our team? How do we deliver our care? And taking time out to reflect might feel strange to begin with, but actually it's as important as the knowledge and skills that we have in getting the work done, how we actually work together. So do we value and respect and embrace diversity? Is there diversity within our team? Do we learn or do we blame? Do we support? Do we learn from each other? Are people able to challenge decisions, and are people able to speak up? And are we able to give and receive feedback? So there are some pointers there about the types of things that you might reflect on as teams. which are really important. If I can just have the next slide, please. But also it's thinking about me. What's my contribution? How do you turn up every day? How do we all turn up every day? We all have a responsibility to play our part. So this is about encouraging reflection within teams on how we actually work together. What's your contribution to your team culture and therefore to the care that you deliver? How do you turn up every day? You know, and as John said, we know that at the moment things are testing, but actually it's reflecting on your own behaviour and thinking, what is it actually like to be on the receiving end of me? How am I at the moment? Am I behaving in a way that I would want to be treated? Am I giving and receiving feedback appropriately? You know, this is about self-reflection, and the self-reflection, the questions that we can pose ourselves are endless, but what matters is what we learn and what we flex and what we adapt in terms of our culture and what we want to experience within our teams. If I move on to the next slide, please. In terms of my team and the team I work with, it's made up of myself, Alex, Alexander Lyon and Alison Shields. And we've nominally split where we work within and across the organisation, but our fundamental aim is to support leaders, teams, individuals, managers to ensure that Nottinghamshire Healthcare is a great place to give and receive care. And we talk very much about creating capability and changing culture. We've got a variety of tools. Thank you, that was very instinctive. We've got a variety of tools, videos, resources on our Connect pages that can support people. But at a trust level, we can be found promoting just and restorative culture through events and initiatives, parallel learning, culture matters, and also creating connections with other teams, quality standards, freedom to speak up, to make sure that everything is aligned, all our work is aligned to achieving what we need to achieve. At a team level, we work very closely with our own heads of workforce to ensure that what we do, our organisational development resource, is really closely aligned to support divisional priorities, and also with managers to support specific challenges within teams. Like I say, our role is to help leaders, managers and teams to identify the results they want to see, understand more about their current culture and how that's either helping or hindering, and understand and work together on things that might change that. There's no one fix and no quick fix to changing culture. And as a small team, we have, you know, in the past, we've worked with lots of teams, but we can't change people's cultures for them. We want to be able to deliver more sustainable and lasting change within teams and not one-off approaches. And we also want to increase our footprint across the organisation. So we've developed a programme of work called Creating Capability and Changing Culture. Just simply a more dynamic and different way of delivering organisational development across our organisation and working in with teams. And in a nutshell, it's just, rather than working with lots of individual teams, it involves working with groups of managers. Rather than delivering interventions directly into teams, it means developing the capability and confidence of our leaders and managers to do this themselves, with diagnostic tools to support and determine cultural priorities. And rather than delivering one-off interventions, it's about engaging teams and managers in the process of doing this themselves over a prolonged period of time and with access to ongoing organisational development support. All of this supports that aligns to all of the cultural priorities our organisation's setting. And at an individual level, then we provide a range of self-help tools that, you know, can be accessed via Connect. We also offer one-to-one coaching subject to capacity and facilitate 360-degree leadership training. So I hope this gives a really quick whistle-stop tour of the types of things that we actually do within organisations. You know, if there are questions, obviously pop them in the chat today, you know, and you can also get in touch with us. Thank you for that. And I'm going to hand back to Sarah Furley.
Thank you, Kaye. The just and restorative culture work is just critical, isn't it, for us being a great place to work and being diverse and inclusive as well. So really important, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about that as we go forward. So the next presentation is a video. It's not just a good news story, I think it's an incredible news story. It's about Dwayne, who was the recipient of the Positive Star Award this month, and his incredible and selfless actions. Well, you'll see for yourself the impact of that. Thank you. We'll switch the video on.
Hi, I'm John Brewin, Chief Executive of Knott's Healthcare. Today I'm really pleased to be presenting the Positive Star Award to Dwayne Blackwood, who works in the IT department. Dwayne was working at Park House Health and Care Centre and witnessed a potentially serious patient safety incident, and due to his quick-witted, quick-minded thinking, he was able to intervene and save the day. It was a potentially really serious incident, and due to Dwayne's action, it was able to be resolved in a really positive way. So I'm on my way to thank him, and hopefully it'll be a big surprise.
I look at Dwayne.
He's in here.
What's the coincidence? Hi everybody.
Hello.
Where is he? There he is. Dwayne. I've come to award you this month's Positive Star Award. So it's a cake for everybody.
Right, cheers.
So this is for you, and it's got a little badge on it. For your, I don't know if everyone knows the story, what Dwayne did.
We've got the posters on there, so Hancock, Blackwood. All there.
So maximise, trust values, patient safety first, and what he did down at Park House was fantastic, and it was a potentially really serious incident and very traumatic for all involved, but he quick-witted, quick action saved the day. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the Trust Board and personally, and say thank you, very well done.
All right, thank you.
I hope he's very proud of his actions, because he deserves that Positive Star Award. Oh, background music, how nice. So we're just now going to move on to the questions that have been asked whilst we've been live. So I'm just going to read them out. Mostly for the people that are perhaps listening again, because they won't be able to read these questions. So the first one is from Lou, who has asked the question, how and where do you see the Trust's research activities fitting into the strategy and objectives? And the answer is it's absolutely critical, Lou. Thank you for raising it. Critical because it is one of the ways to improve patient outcomes, and one of the ways to find new ways of working. And where it fits in the strategy, at the moment we think it fits under the quality strategic objective that Craig talked about earlier. And I think there's something for us to consider about how we create the conditions in the Trust for innovation and research to absolutely flourish. So what I would say is we will be coming out to the research and innovation team to listen to what you think is important and how you think we can do it, and we will capture that and make sure that that's reflected in our strategy. So Lou, I hope. Oh, I've got a just. John, are we coming to you just to add to that?
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, I just wanted to, if the technology is working, to add a little bit to that. And thanks, it's a really good question. And just to develop Sarah's response, by way of we do host the Institute of Mental Health as part of the organisation that's got a really significant infrastructure and expertise around research. One of the few organisations nationally that has such a service, and the quality of the research done there is both national and international standard. One of the strategies we need to, and we are working on, is how we can link that with the endeavours of the trust. So in terms of smaller scale projects, helping support multidisciplinary professional groups get involved in research, and that's part of the ongoing engagement and discussion that you referred to, Sarah. So I'm really excited. I think in the longer term there's real opportunity here for us to really grow this part of what we do, because as you say, at the end of the day, they're the sorts of things that improve the quality of life and outcomes for patients and service users. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And we've also just got a follow-up question here about when are we expecting to launch the strategy? So next month we will start the consultation, as Craig described earlier, and we'll do that and work on that throughout the rest of the calendar year. And then as we enter January, February, we will have the draft strategy there, and it will go through consultation again, ultimately ending up with the board, who will sign it off, with a view that we will have our completed strategy ready by the end of March 2022. So we enter the new year of April 2022 with our new 5-year strategy. So that's the plan for that. I'm also just going to pick up one other comment, really, that, and I'm going to read it out to you, and it's about Afghanistan. And the comment says, "We are aware that many of our staff have been watching the ongoing situation in Afghanistan, the impact of which is far-reaching. Colleagues may be concerned for family, friends living in Afghanistan, or will find the scenes in the media distressing. We also understand that seeing the unfolding situation in the media may also impact on our armed service colleagues who have served in Afghanistan, or staff with family members who have served in Afghanistan." And it is a really difficult situation there, and often watching those types of situations unfold, often we can feel very helpless watching that, and it also just generates such concern and strong emotional feelings watching it happen if you're impacted by it. There is support available on our Connect web pages, but also the health and wellbeing team are also there and available and willing to talk through those issues with you if you are experiencing that. So please use that service. I'm just scrolling through the questions. I'm going to look to, I think I'm just double checking that we've covered all the questions. I think we have. I'm going to let Alex tell me if we haven't, but I think we have. And in which case, what I will do. Oh no, we're going to Helen. Helen, where are you?
Oh, I've got a wonky camera. Hang on. Hi. I suppose just as part of Sarah's presentation a few minutes ago, which outlined the care and support given to a patient in long-term segregation on one of our ward areas, the only addition to that I was going to make was talking about the value of hybrid roles and how important they were. And I'm a real strong believer that because we've got less resource in terms of nurses and indeed any of the AHPs, we've got to look a bit wider. And the recruitment of Sarah as a band 6 nurse, but also the recruitment of the band 4 communication support workers, how invaluable that's been to taking this agenda forward. And actually these were people that we looked at as a specific skill set, and these were people that were already out there, that had already received the training, and they've got the skills, knowledge and experience to be able to work well in this role. So that was all that I wanted to say in addition really to the presentation.
Helen, thank you for that. So I'm just going to wrap up now. I'm going to say thank you for attending today, and thank you if you're listening on repeat. Just to echo some of the messages that John gave this morning, we understand how challenging it can be out there for whatever reason, whether that's acuity of patients, whether your service is under demand, whether you're dealing with COVID sickness and isolation or some of the Afghanistan issues. So thank you. It's summer holiday season. If you've had your holiday, I hope you feel rested and you hang on to that feeling. If your holiday's coming, I hope you enjoy it. So the next Connecting Knots is on the 23rd of September. I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to leave you with the Positive Stars nominations for July. So thanks very much and goodbye.